Okay, so now we are on Chapter 9, Liberty and War. And I'm not in my normal little reading nook because my husband is asleep in that room. It's actually like this cute little window seat. It's like one of my favorite places in the whole house. I even like to go to sleep there, but can't bother him and do this review while he's sleeping. So I'm in my office. So let's get started. If I remember correctly, this one was rather short. Okay, first he deals with the fact that only Congress can declare war, which, you know, we've pretty much thrown that out the window, haven't we? What am I looking for? I had a bag of beef jerky, and I don't know where I put it down. But here we go. He says, passing various war powers resolutions is not the same as a declaration of war. So in the first place, our country was not at war in Vietnam or Iraq and is now not at war in Afghanistan. And secondly, since one simply cannot effectively be at war against a thing, an idea, or a loosely knit group of people that is not of nation, we are also not involved in a so-called war on terrorism, war on drugs, or war on coronavirus either. Now, we'll continue because it's been maybe a week since I've read this part because I got ahead of myself. But is he claiming we weren't at war in Vietnam? I think he clears it up in a bit here. He says, some people have argued that this is a naive approach to today's life, and as a practical matter, Congress has declared war by delegating its war-making decisions to the president. So they argue the declaration requirement in the Constitution is just an unnecessary formality. While it is true that there were no declarations of war before we fought in Korea, Vietnam, Panama, Serbia, the Persian Gulf, or anywhere else since 1941, this is not an unimportant distinction. The drafters of the Constitution not only were not naive, they were brilliant. Well, I want to hold on a second here. The people who are objecting that it's naive, I don't think they were claiming that having a constitutional requirement is naive. I think what they were claiming is that Congress de facto did declare war by saying, it's up to the president. I'm not saying I agree. I'm just saying I think this is a little bit of a misrepresentation here. But he says, the drafters of the Constitution knew that the decision about whether to go to war or not is one of the most critical decisions that can be made. That is why they required the protections of a specific procedure to be followed before that event could occur. I agree. But by not rebelling, is that the word, against the president, are they not de facto ceding that authority? It's an interesting thought because, well, technically you could say we were not at war in Vietnam. Weren't we really, though? You know what I'm saying? It's just kind of a strange distinction, I think. So, moving on to just general threats here. He says, does anyone really think that even if we give up all of our constitutional protections, that we can possibly protect every highway, bridge, or tunnel in our country from a terrorist act, or every theater, stadium, school, or shopping mall? The Soviet Union tried to do this in Afghanistan and Chechnya and failed, and so would we. We must be mature and sophisticated in understanding that there are some threats in life from which there are no protections, and we should then go about our normal lives. Or as I say, liberty is not a tame lion. That part was, the last sentence was mine, not his. Okay, continuing down a bit. we must not give in to politics. We must understand that if politicians really wanted to reduce the ability of those radical people to harm us, they would do a major thing that would cripple most of them: repeal drug prohibition. That is good. The primary funding for terrorists all around the world is the money received from the sale of illegal drugs. In fact, drug prohibition is literally the golden goose of terrorism. Okay, and this is something most of us, we have family members that are affected, and that is the abysmal treatment of wounded veterans. So he says, today, when they are first wounded, the medical attention our troops receive from the military community is generally wonderful enough to bring tears to your eyes. But once troops are stabilized and eventually discharged, the VA is simply not funded well enough to handle their remaining needs. And he calls this an egregious breach of contract, and I believe I would agree there. Congressman Ron Paul said that the U.S. today has about 400 military reservations around the world. Yes, 400. Why? What are we doing in all of these places? Let's audit them publicly and look at them individually. If they are necessary, fine, keep them or even reinforce them. But at this point, most of them probably are not. Probably after just a 45-day audit, we would determine that 300 of them are simply not necessary, such that they should be closed as long as we wouldn't be breaking our agreements with the foreign countries. If we would be, we could renegotiate, or we could leave after the leases or agreements have expired. These are things we need to do. And here's where he's much more moderate, I believe. He says, our military policy should be controlled by two prongs. First, we should get involved militarily in various problem areas around the world only if the world community decides to participate in that action, unless that matter expressly affects our own national interests. That just leaves the door wide open. What is national interest? I would not be that broad. That's kind of like the Commerce Clause. Almost anything could be twisted to be national interest. And world community, if they get involved, I don't think that's a prong I would agree with. Extremists like the Taliban are as much a threat to Germany, China, Russia, and Turkey, and Japan as they are to us. And unless those countries choose to participate in whatever action is going to be taken, we should not be involved. Second, in places like Syria, Iraq, Iran, the Sudan, and others where extremists are attempting to impose their own selfish will, we should, as publicly as possible, let the people in those countries know that they will have to control their own destiny. Thus, they can choose either to live with anarchy, wrong use of that word, Judge Gray, or with freedom and act accordingly. We cannot and do not want to control their country, religious beliefs, or lives. We can join the world community in helping them live in freedom. What does that mean? If they request it. But the fundamental choices about how they will live their lives will have to be made by them. I'm not advocating for interference, but I think if we're going to be talking about being naive, it's not simply as easy as, well, you got to choose not to follow these extremists. It's like saying, well, if you're in a mob-controlled area, you just got to choose to defy the mob, that's all. So that is it for the Liberty and War section. Next will be liberty and immigration, and probably do that tomorrow. I think we have 2 chapters left, if I'm correct. No, we have 3. And I'm really eager to get started on the next book, but I don't want these videos to be too long. Bye-bye.